My background is basically from the early 80s. I was an undergraduate student with Professor Roy Ascott. I did my fine art degree, and I was very fortunate that I worked with Roy Ascott very early on. Roy was very much a pioneer in introducing telecommunication arts and sort of establishing that whole field of work. And I worked with Roy on a number of different projects that were very much about collaborative arts practice. They were really about groups of artists around the world who were in the 80s using computer networks. And in an art school, this was unheard of to have a computer in an art school, and you're often met with some quite opposition to bringing that kind of technology into an art school environment. So I was very fortunate to have that opportunity to work in that environment. We're getting the images, not quite, not just yet. So I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. But I think what fascinated me about this whole idea about having this ability to engage in an arts practice that is collaborative was about artists becoming viewers, and essentially viewers becoming artists. That we're not talking about sort of the ownership of an artwork or the sort of single author of an artwork. We were talking about this really collaborative practice. And I think this has really excited me and led me to lots of different works. But ultimately, that was the sort of the 80s, and it took us, in some ways, some years to get to a situation now where we have what we call social networking, and we're now using the internet to do the things that we were doing as artists in the mid 80s. So this was. In some way, it's completely come full circle. And I actually took my work, my practice, which initially was setting up computers in a gallery or in some kind of installation. We would sit down at computers and we would start networking with other artists, and we'd start sending images, sort of black and white Mac Paint images over the computer network to other people, and they would then receive those images, and they would work on another paint program, and we're having some trouble with the technology. Do you want to restart it? Maybe that might help. If you restart the machine, it might boot up the projector. Sorry, where am I? So basically, what we were doing was we were groups of artists all at computer terminals, sending images to each other, and they were changing them and sending them back. Engaged in a very ephemeral sort of practice and activity that to view this work you had to be online, and you had to go and look at it in the network. But as I said, my work slightly moved away from that, because I wanted to engage with my audience, not only through the kind of screens and keyboards and a mouse, but I wanted to engage in them in a more immersive way, and through installations and through other kinds of telepresent and telematic environments. And I did a number of different projects I'll talk about in a moment very briefly. But ultimately where that's led me now, I've kind of had to wait in some ways for some years until the network, until there were possibilities such as the sort of social networking tools we're seeing now that allowed me to do exactly what I was doing back in the 80s. And most recently I've actually been using I've been working with Second Life quite a bit and doing some projects using Second Life, which I'm very fascinated by the possibilities there in terms of how people can participate and interact and share these kinds of creative practices and engage in the sort of work collaboratively that I want to do. So just to talk then about some of these other works that I did, I sort of moved away from the practice, the area of working with Roy Ascott on these kind of telematic workstation type projects, to developing telepresent installations using video conferencing technology. And this is going back now sort of the early, well, 92 was the first installation that I produced, and that was a piece that some of you may have heard of, which is called Telematic Dreaming, which consisted of two beds actually in two different galleries that were linked with an ISDN video conferencing connection. This was in Finland in 92, and Finland was I'm very fortunate that I worked in Finland on this project. It was a commission, because Finland had very, very good ISDN video conferencing capabilities, some of the best in the world. And I literally did an installation. You may or may not know it. It was with two beds, and it had a video camera above one bed that grabbed an image of one bed and sent it through an ISDN line to a video projector that projected it on the other bed. And then a camera picked up the image and sent it back again, and to a series of monitors around that bed. So it allowed two different people in two different spaces to share this shared telepresence space that someone could literally just touch someone at the top left corner image there as an overhead view of that installation, and there's others here too. But it just allowed people to share this shared telepresence space. But in answer to this panel's question that's being posed somehow, is that my work was not about the artwork, in a sense, really was the people who were participating in it, the people who were lying down in that bed. Without those people, it's just an empty space. It's an empty bed. It's a series of projectors and screens that surround it. And as an artist, I was the facilitator of that interactivity that occurred on that bed surface. And I've done similar kinds of projects in many different forms, using examples such as sofas, using two sofas, linking them together over a distance. For example, this piece here was produced for a children's hospital. Actually, it was a commission for the Evelina Children's Hospital at St Thomas's in London, and connected the children together on either side of this waiting room sofa. So, like I said, my role is about the facilitator of this work, and the audience's role is about creating the artwork. I'm ad-libbing here, trying to find images. Okay, there's some more current work, but I'm doing in Second Life, and I am really very fascinated by how my work is a very similar model to what I've been doing in my earlier practice with telepresence and telematics that's emerged for me in Second Life. And I embrace this idea of this virtual persona, this avatar, as I have done in my earlier work with using the beds and the sofas and whatever else. I'm very interested in this idea of my presence being somewhere else and actually allowing myself control of that avatar, that puppet, that figure that is in many ways a mirror of me. And I often talk about this notion of a mirror in a kind of a Lacan sense of the mirror stage, that actually my presence in the world is seen through this interface, this screen interface. And the screen interface of the bed is a very charged and very complex interface. It's a bed surface. But also the screen interface of Second Life is also a very charged area where I'm representing myself in that virtual environment. I'm probably running completely out of time and not quite sure how to sum up. But basically, yeah, I think it's down. What I would like to finish with is just to say that I think this notion of social networking, I think we have to think about how we can really engage with people and bring people into discussions that they feel ownership of something. I mean, you see one or two messages on the board behind us where perhaps the problem is that people are not feeling ownership or engagement within an environment or a space. And I think we have to look at how we can bring people into a more controlled and creative way that they can participate and feel as an artist in this space. I've run out of time. I think I have 1 minute. Okay, well, so I think in many ways it has taken this long for us to get this far, and I think the web has held us up somewhat. HTML is kind of, for me, was a very closed system of interactivity. Very often we ended up in the mid-90s reaching a telephone number at the end of a sort of a long web search. And it was rather frustrating in a very lonely, isolated space, and people talked about all the millions of people who were using it, but you felt very isolated. And now we're having to struggle with that architecture of HTML to get round all those things to make this a more socially interactive and accessible environment, which it seems to be, it is now becoming. So just to echo the words of other speakers, it is a very exciting time and things are going to change, and I think it's up to artists and users to generate that new digital content and creativity to really sort of take it forward. Okay, there we go. I think I'll